I've played through Curse of Strahd a couple of different times because people always want to run it, and I'm always like, I'm never scared. I'm never scared in Curse of Strahd because
Why would I be?
like, I have all of these things at my disposal where I can wipe out armies of zombies. So 3 zombies is not scary to me.
I think I was 2 or 3 sessions into Curse of Strahd when the monk in the party was going, by the end of this, I will have suplexed Strahd.
Welcome back to Questing Beast, I'm Ben. In this video, I sat down with 3 of my favorite RPG creators and YouTubers, James Introcaso from MCDM, Dadi from MysticArts, and RB Bo from Deficient Master. Throughout our conversation, we got into some very interesting topics suggested both by Questing Beast patrons and normal viewers of the channel, including things like how the OSR has influenced the way that they play role-playing games, and what they would do if they were in charge of Dungeons & Dragons. These guys are some of the most insightful commentators in the RPG industry right now, so settle in for a great conversation. Before we get started though, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Flail, an old school brawler by Games Omnivorous. It blends the chaos, randomness, and vibes of Dungeon Crawl classics with the simplicity of games like My Own Knave and Mouse Ritter. It uses a tactile item and gear system built around physical tokens, and a combat system driven by poker rolls. Roll a bunch of d6s and try to get as many 1s as you can. Get 2 and deal double damage. Get 3 and instantly slay your enemy. Other abilities can trigger on 2 pairs, full houses, and more. It's a potent brew of some of the best original and OSR mechanics stitched together into a vicious beast of a game. Head over to BackerKit right now to check it out using the link in the description below. And now, here's our conversation. Why don't we just get started real quick and just go around and introduce yourselves? Why don't we just start with James, and then we'll just go around in a circle. James, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, I'm James Introcaso. I'm the now game director of Crows over at MCDM. I was the lead designer of the Draw Steel role-playing game, and I worked on a bunch of different role-playing game third-party products, mostly for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I've been playing role-playing games for 30 years.
Awesome. And Deficient?
Hey, I'm RB Bo, otherwise known as Deficient Master. I've been a DM for 12, 13 years this now, and I am known mainly for my, initially for my GM advice, and then now for DnD, but actually insert game here on the YouTubes.
Yeah. And Dadi?
Hi, my name is Dadi. I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over a decade. I do these little YouTube DM advice videos on the internet.
And Dadi's channel has been going absolutely ham on YouTube recently, because you've been making videos for like 16 months or something like that.
Yeah.
And you just hit like 100,000 subscribers, which is insane. You're just like speed running YouTube, which is incredibly impressive.
I have no idea what happened or why it happened, but here we are, and I'm trying to deal.
Well, thanks to all of you guys for being here. I thought we'd just have like a discussion about role-playing games, game styles, all of that stuff. I have a bunch of questions from commenters and from my patrons who just had general GMing advice questions, because I know all you guys have made videos talking about GM advice and how you prefer to run games. And I figured we'd just talk through some of those. The first topic I wanted to bring up was one that I wanted to mention, but one of the commenters wanted discussed as well, which is just what is the most influential thing you've picked up from the OSR? Because I've noticed that like all 3 of you maybe don't identify as an OSR guy per se, but I've seen more and more OSR influence kind of leak out there into the broader gaming sphere. And I'm really curious about how that happened for you and like how it may have influenced you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have a friend named Gregory who loves to run OSR games and has been running them for us for like 10 years, right? And he has a weekly game that he plays us through, and we've played all kinds of stuff. We've played Maze Rats and Knave and Troika and, a bunch of different things with him. And one of the things that I really learned, right? One of the first things he learned was, ran for us was the Trail of Stone and Sorrow, which is a really great adventure that I don't want to talk about too much because there's some really good like plot twists and stuff in it, but it's a lot of fun to be able to, it's a good introduction to what I think are probably some OSR philosophies that I had not really been exposed to playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and superhero games and things that were more explicitly heroic, and you were kind of like, well, look, I am a hammer and everything is a nail, so I can punch my way through every problem, right? And I think for me, the big thing that was it took me back to when I first started playing role-playing games, and I started with, like second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but I quickly moved over to the fantasy trip, right? And it took me back to that sort of like, oh yeah, it's not about necessarily, hey, what do I have on my sheet that can solve this problem? It's about, how do I solve this problem? What would be the thing that I would do to kind of solve this thing? And then I can look at the sheet to think about like, okay, do I have the right gear to start to solve this sort of problem and that sort of thing? So the idea of thinking beyond the rules of the game and finding a game that can help you then think in that way, right, was really, really helpful, because I think that's one of the big things that I have seen the OSR do is they take this idea and say like, okay, here's how we can help you do that, right? We don't just expect you to know how to do this. Here are the ways in which we think that we can help you and reinforce what this game is about. And so for me, one of those big ones was Knave. Not to kiss your butt too much here, Ben. But right, like the idea of like, okay, you're going into this dungeon where you want to get equipment, because equipment really informs what you can do, right? That for me was like, oh, I see how this game reinforces the idea of like, go in there and get that thing, because you'll be able to get more of those things once you have that thing, right? And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And you're working on an OSR game right now, right?
Yeah, so we're working on a game called Crows, right, which has a lot of OSR influences. I'm always hesitant to say OSR because then people will be like, well, actually, it's NSR, right? Or actually, it's that kind of thing. So, but yes, absolutely. That's where it comes from, right? It's a big OSR influence for us is Crows.
Heck yeah.
I think that sort of OSR thing of like, because the game is so explicitly about rewarding the behaviors that it does, where you don't get that in D&D 5th edition. So if you're playing something like OSR, you get the thing of like, you got to go into this dungeon, you got to get the good stuff, and that's going to make you want to go again. Thinking about reward structures like that. And for me, it was the biggest change was thinking about location-based adventures as opposed to event-based adventures. So many superhero-style games or heroic fantasy, it's about this thing is about to happen as the players enter that scenario, and now we duke it out. I really like those sort of, I don't know if this is particularly OSR, but you get this in Mythic Bastion land where it's like these huge hex crawls, and now we're going to go explore through the wilderness and see what's out there. And then it becomes kind of more fantastical to me because the players get to stumble upon those things on their own. I think it's so fascinating.
My personal biggest influences was when I was first getting into tabletop RPGs in general. I was heavily into Pathfinder First Edition, and I had a group of players, and I too had the schedule and lifestyle to where we could get really granular into that system. Because games like Pathfinder and a lot of the more modern tabletop RPGs in the last decade or so have play styles like that, where they just reward you mastering the system itself. As I got older, but I was literally in that transition we had some great first edition Pathfinder campaigns, but then I established my real daytime job. I got married, and then game nights turned into more of a massive amounts of homework, both before and after the game. And I even had my players also were, of course, growing in their own careers and their own lives alongside me. So I had some that were very much just did not care about the rules itself or what exactly we were playing. They more so cared about the camaraderie of getting together and sitting down for a table. Whereas I had some players that were just literally building the characters for everybody else in that system. So I'm somebody that when I get into a new hobby, I obsess over it and I want to read all about it. So I was looking up any type of DM advice. We blew through all the Matt Colville stuff. But then as I was getting into just searching, I found basically the OSR blogosphere. Kind of right at the tail end when all that I can't remember, it's the Google that when I remember there's a big Google
Plus.
Yes, when Google Plus was shutting down, I remember that's when I kind of really started getting into it. So I was following a lot of these individual blogs. Goblin Punch comes to mind. The Tao of D&D is another one off top of head. And then other channels like Runehammer at the time, he was Drunkens and Dragons. He was very inspirational and just oh wait, there's a way you can play this that capitalizes on tabletop RPGs' strengths of, hey, you've got a real life person here that can compute and calculate what we can do in this situation. We can go back to kind of that. I always try to, whenever I bring new people into this hobby, I always, I don't hand them a character sheet. I instead say, hey, let's pretend you're 9 years old again. You are a wizard and you can cast fireball, sleep and, charm person. You just tell me what you want to do and I will explain how to do it mechanically. So the games like the OSR, again, for me, that was my dive into it was ICRPG. And then OSE was Old School Essentials was kind of my big stepping point into a different, more OSR rule set. But it fit the lifestyle that I wanted to have when I ran these games, of that I can just master this skeleton of a system, and then everything else can be either I can tweak it myself / like the game just rewarded me for just mastering one core system, and then I could branch out to whatever it is my player group needed at the time.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. Sorry, Ben, but it's really fascinating for me to listen to you guys talk about this, because I'm behind. I think you've all done way, way more delving into this stuff than I have. And I'm just sort of starting my journey of trying all these things. I spent the Easter weekend just getting into Vagabond for the first time, playing campaign in that, and trying out Vagabond. I did Dragonbane last year. So I'm sort of starting to dip my toes into the actual systems of it. And I'm consistently fascinated at the speed of it, like at how much you can get done in a short session. And like from that standpoint, I really get it, especially as we're getting older and there's other stuff we need to be doing with our so-called free time.
Yeah, and to RB's point, right? Like, not only can you get through more, the prep tends to be lighter too. So you get through more, and you like the value of the preparation you do is often much higher, because you don't need to prepare for as long to get through more content, which can be a real boon when you are older and have a lot of adult responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. My big thing too is that I'm big on if I'm going to participate in any type of activity, I guess I want to use the best version of it. And I don't say like, oh, OSR is the best, but in the sense of like, there are a lot of games out there where this would have been amazing back in 1970s when we didn't have, when the best video game at the time was Pong, but if we have but that again, that is definitely a personal preference, because I still see the appeal of you can have that type of granularity of a game that kind of feels like a video game, like a Diablo, but then you also have the benefit of the GM being behind the screen and can do things, can tweak things with the story and whatnot, and with the players.
I was going to say it kind of leans into the strengths of the medium. Like anytime you're playing something where the DM and the players get to have more authoritative voice over the system, it leans into what makes RPGs special as compared to video games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I started out with Pathfinder First Edition as well. And one of the reasons I kind of discovered the OSR and got into it is just because Pathfinder was so slow. Like, speed is super important for me. Like, I just got so tired of being at sessions. This happens to me at conventions all the time. Every once in a while, I'll go to conventions because I want to try out new systems, because I feel like I should. And sometimes they're great, but so often you run into these games where, it's 3-4 hours long and you get through just like this tiny little bit of content. And you can do so much more with the OSR stuff just because more things can happen. You can push forward, you can make decisions, the decisions matter, you can see the ramifications, you move on. And the speed is just enormously important for me. And OSR seems to do that better than most systems for me. And because when I first got into RPGs, I was running for kids a lot.
Yeah.
And we had these like 1 hour sessions after school. So it's 1 hour. You got to get through some stuff. We're not just going to have like one fight with goblins. I want to get through like 6 or 7 rooms. I want to like deal with some traps. I want to like find some weird stuff. And you can't do that with most normal, more heavy fantasy systems. You need something really light and fast. Let's see. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'm shaking my head. You can't see it, but I'm shaking my head.
So some other questions that are actually related to that from some of the other commenters. DGB Smith wanted to know, challenging the character. Some people have mentioned that, like using stats and abilities, versus challenging the player, like having the actual people solve puzzles and come up with solutions. Neither one is necessarily right or wrong, but how do you figure out which one to do and how much to lean into one or the other? Because that seems like to be a kind of a very OSR thing where it's like challenge the players more than their characters. How do you guys try and balance that in your own games?
For me, this is the fruitful void. Sorry, I keep there's so many people in this call. For me, this is the fruitful void, because what happens is that whatever you're not mechanicize, or like putting mechanics on, is whatever the game is actually about. And you see this with Mothership in terms of stealth mechanics. But for me, when I'm wanting to challenge my players, it's not the monsters in the dungeon. I play mostly 5th edition. So when I'm challenging the players and not the player characters, it's moral conundrums, or it's political intrigue, or it's dramatic choices on the world stage where their stats don't enter into it. And I just want to put it up to their players. What do you want to do right now? What are you excited about in this scenario? And then when it's time to challenge the characters, that's when I lean hard on what I like the system for. And this is sort of the difference between systems, is often the bit that isn't explored that much. And same with OSR, like the classic example, like 10-foot pole or the mirror peeking around corners or whatever those things are. They don't have a mechanic ascribed to them, because they're giving that tool to the player and the DM to open up the game and let the players decide what they're doing with this.
I think for me, it's been more of I go back to that. How I run things is that whole, again, whether I'm explaining it to a newbie or somebody that's been playing longer than I have, I tell them, like, I'm going at it from an angle that we're 9 years old again, and let's play pretend. The minute I will pull out rules is when I need to know if, no, I shot you first, no, I shot you first, kind of, that's the difference between these games and then, back when we were 10 years old or younger, running around playing cops and robbers. We have mechanized systems to determine those uncertainties. So, I challenge the characters when it makes sense that I don't know what the character would be capable of here in this moment. Then I'll pull out the mechanics. Whereas I prefer to challenge the players, both in the sense of, yes, and that is usually where, agreeing with Dadi, that's where I challenge the players too, in the moral conundrums, in like the circumstances, rather than the, can you beat this monster? Again, that's where but everything I try to make for that particular audience, meaning I make it for that particular player. So I feel like the best DMing has always been the DMs that really understand the audience / that player. So that's why, again, you can have such interesting situations and memorable moments with those lifelong, forever players, versus the, you can have a lot of fun, like even in a convention sense. I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of cool memorable moments, but those were oftentimes reliant on mechanics, because I don't know that person. I don't know these players. I'm literally meeting them. I'm shaking their hand and and then in 5 minutes I'm running them a game. So I think for me, when do I lean towards challenging the player versus challenging the character? That would depend on just basically how intimate of a word, but how close I am to that person.
It's funny. I feel like the idea of challenging the character can sometimes actually come through in those political choices, right? I play with a lot of people that I met like doing college theater, right? And so for them, those moral choices are not necessarily about what they as a player would do, right? It does make them think about, like, can I do what I think, like, I've been playing this person mercenary this whole time, and so it's almost like you see the player fight with the character, right? And it challenges both of them at the same time, because the player is like, I wouldn't normally like sacrifice a bunch of innocent townsfolk in order for the greater good to happen, right? But this character might, but I also, there's this social contract, and I don't want my friends to think I'm a jerk, right? Like, there's this whole kind of inner dynamic you can see. But I do think, to like the original question, right? For me, I've played a lot of games, and I often play with, the same group of like 20 or so people, not all at the same time, right? But like they come in and out, and we've been playing games for so long together that the style for me, I was been thinking about this because Matt, my boss, right, did this video about like, what's your GM style like, right? And I think for me, it really does change with the game. And often when I sit down, I'll say like, this game works like this, right? So Draw Steel, which is the game we created, right, which is one of those like, it takes an hour to get through a combat games, and it's big and it's heroic. You often want to challenge the character, because challenging the player with the puzzle when you're supposed to be like a fantasy superhero feels weird, because you're like, I'm supposed to be so smart, but I, the player, cannot figure this thing out. And that makes me feel bad, right? Because that's what the genre we're in. Whereas if it's in Crows, where it's like, you're kind of more a regular person, right? I don't mind challenging the player as much. And the player expects that a little bit more because it's like, okay, well, I could actually be rewarded with my wits because if we rely on the dice, things are less likely to go in my favor. Where in Draw Steel, if we rely on the dice, things are more likely to go in my favor because that's how the rules of the game kind of engineer things, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of about, like, for me, what does the system incentivize? Well, the system incentivizes in OSR, in a lot of OSR games, like, if I can avoid picking up the dice and solve this problem another way, I should probably do that because I'd rather not leave it to chance, right? Whereas in Draw Steel, it's like, well, I get to, shoot fire out of my eyes if I pick up the dice, and so that's what I'm going to do because I want to shoot fire out of my eyes.
Yeah. But that's what I appreciated with Draw Steel, and I don't even know if I feel like I probably should have even stressed on this more in my own review video of it, of that, like, I really appreciate that you guys had this front of page is, this is the type of game we have made, and this is what we are. If you want something else, if you want something that feels like X, Y, or Z, here's X, Y, or Z. Here's our best recommendation for X, Y, and Z. So I that's what I really enjoyed about Draw Steel, whereas I felt like, at least in the 5th edition realm, and even just in the Pathfinder world, I was promised this, like, you can do anything as long as it's within these 400 pages.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And that nothing makes me, right, like, the idea that, like, Curse of Strahd is this very popular horror module, right, that, like, I've played through Curse of Strahd a couple of different times because people always want to run it. And I'm always like, I'm never scared. I'm never scared in Curse of Strahd because
Why would I be?
Like, yeah, I have all of these things at my disposal where I can wipe out armies of zombies. So 3 zombies is not scary to me. I
think I was 2 or 3 sessions into Curse of Strahd when the monk in the party was going, by the end of this, I will have suplex Strahd. And that was just the character statement of what they were going to do. Like, it's really tough to actually terrify anyone. And I had this kind of, because there's this Venn diagram between what the player is and what the character is, and when they overlap there can be dissonance between the two, and it also comes down to the punishment. And I discovered when I'm running more OSR style adventures, making the dice roll be scary, like, not just about rewarding going into dungeons and rewarding by finding loot or whatever, but how you punish choices made when the player wants to involve the dice. Like, they are asking, can I remove the responsibility of me to think about this and roll a die? And then as the DM, especially in, like, OSR style systems, going, yes, you can, but I have a progress clock, or I have a random encounter table. So, like, you're going to spend some time on this, and if you fail, I'm going to go mark it off. And then suddenly they go, hang on, let me think about this. Let me think seriously for a minute and see if I can figure out how to not roll the die in this situation and make a choice there.
It's really interesting to think about, like, this topic in terms of immersion, because it's interesting how it works both ways. Like, in something like Draw Steel, you can feel more immersed as a fantasy superhero by using all of these incredibly powerful special abilities. Like, I feel like this incredibly powerful guy. But it also, in some ways, works in the opposite direction in OSR games when you don't use the mechanics and you just tell the players, you just got to figure this out for yourself. For me, often that feels really immersive too, because it feels like me, like the actual person, am inside the game solving stuff. So I don't feel like a different person in the game. I feel like I'm me. And that's just, like, 2 different kinds of immersion that are really interesting.
I think it's also fascinating to think of, like, for James, you've worked on both Draw Steel and you're now leading the design on Crows, and you've got these are 2 very different ideas at the base core, and not this qualitative statement about what system is better, but what you're trying to achieve. And the most important thing with any of this, if it's OSR or anything else, it's the ludo-narrative harmony of, are we doing the thing that we should be doing? Like, are we playing the game that we should be playing? Whether that's the system or the adventure, are all of those things pointing at each other, or are they disagreeing all the time? And that's where problems tend to happen, right? Like playing Curse of Strahd in DnD. Like, it bumps. Like...
Have you guys ever played a game that was actually scary? Because that's, like, a common question that people have. Or RPGs, there's so many horror RPGs, but none of them are actually scary.
You don't scare people. You don't scare people in the sense of, like, a horror movie would scare people. You scare people through dread is my mentality. So, like, the example I've used, even I'd made a little Curse of Strahd with the serial numbers filed off called the Count, the Castle, and the Curse, and it's using the Shadow Dark system. But the DC is a scale that is visible to everybody, a la ICRPG. So the players are seeing that, oh my God, to do anything right now, whether that's to hit this monster or to, you know, make a saving throw, I have to hit a 17, a DC 17. That to me, that's how you scare people. Outside of maybe, you know, sticking them in a bathroom, turning off all the lights and cranking your AC down to get that vibe. But as far as I never try to scare people when it comes to like horror. I never try to scare people from like a boo standpoint. I try to scare people with dread of them within through the mechanics. That's why, like, again, I've said before, I don't love level drain in old school, you know, advanced D&D, but I appreciate why it's like the fear factor of it. It's scary when you know if this vampire touches me, I lose 2 levels.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, right? Dread the RPG, right, does exactly what you're saying in like the most visual. And having played that game a couple times, you really see people get nervous, but it's because they see the tower, right, get more and more unstable in front of them, and they make that decision. But yeah, I don't think it's sort of the same way. I've never jump scared anybody, right, in a game.
Yeah.
I managed it. I managed it a couple of days ago. I was so happy. I was running Terran's Adventure for Vagabond, and it describes that in this room, all it says is it's that OSR like bullet point design, but all it says is suit, flesh. Completely stationary. If touched, it screams and dies. And so I describe the thing, and then I pull a face, and then I stay there like completely still until one of the players goes, I poke it, and I go, ah! And then
Wow,
That's great.
But that's year 11. It's the first time I manage it.
I felt like I kind of did that one time where I was running Mothership, and the characters had just gotten onto this spaceship and they wanted to find the cockpit. So they were like running really quickly because they're being chased by some horrible monster. And they were just running through the ship trying to find like the bridge. And I'm just describing the rooms that they're running through. Like, oh, you run through here, you run through the med bay where there's a guy standing in the corner smiling at you, and then you keep running through. And they're like, what? And you want to go back.
yeah.
Back up.
Back up.
Yeah.
And you just have this little like jump scare where you just keep going. And then they want to rewind because now there's something else horrible that's after them. Yeah.
To RB's point, though, about like building it up, I think the key to emotion in RPGs for me is like time. I play really long campaigns. They take ages. But also I play for really long sessions. And that's not something you can really do to random people or at a convention. That's something I can subject my players to because I've got them by the balls. But what you could do is that you can sort of build up emotional layers, and you could build up the dread over the course of a game night, or you can build up the tragedy of something or the joy of something, and you could stack like in render passes, and it creates this sort of this immersion and dread if that's what you're after or whatever it is. But it's RPGs, other than any other medium I found, is so much more about being in it as opposed to catching you, if that makes sense. Like you can catch somebody at the start, but then you always tend to lose people over time, so you have to constantly be getting their attention back.
I also set the expectation when we're playing a horror game, right? Like, because if you go see a comedian, right, you have a totally different experience if you're like, this is going to be great, I'm going to go have a lot of fun seeing a stand-up comedian, versus sitting there with your arms crossed and saying, all right, funny man, make me laugh, right? Like, you're not going to be as into it. So setting up your players for like, hey, this is a horror game, that means it's going to play out like a lot of horror movies or a lot of horror novels or comics, right? And giving some examples so that they know they're supposed to do things like wander off alone, right? And buy into the fact that they're supposed to be afraid, as opposed to, you know, approaching it like it's Pathfinder or D&D and saying like, well, I'm going to punch every ghoul I see in the face. And you're like, well, that's not going to work out for you. But also it's going to create this dissonance right within our gameplay that's going to make even the other players feel like, well, this isn't that scary if we just have the person playing the jock just tackles every zombie we see, right? You know.
And I think a lot of it, like Dadi was saying, is building up emotional investment over time. These sorts of emotions are much easier to evoke over long periods and over long campaigns. Where like I've seen many short games or one shots where the game master really wanted you to have like this strong emotional reaction of some kind during the game, and I just didn't feel anything. Like I don't really know the character that I'm playing. I made him up 5 minutes ago. I don't care that much about what happens to him. But if I've been playing this guy for months, then I definitely will feel something.
I also think like system tends to matter less the longer the campaign is. Like if you're playing just for one night, the novelty of the thing we're playing or how much you like this system or whatever, that's doing so much of the heavy lifting. Whereas like provided you're not hating whatever you're playing, like if you're in a bad mood about this, that's never going to work. But like the longer you get into it, the more it is about the world, the people, the characters, like the beats that we're creating together. It becomes so much. It's like a cheat code if you manage it, but it is really difficult.
Let's go to our next question. This one's from commenter Masquerade, who wants to know, what is your least favorite mechanic from the games that you often run that you just don't bother with anymore? Or is there like a common mechanic in lots of RPGs that you just think, I just don't need to use that? Or you frequently modify, maybe?
For me, again, it's mostly been, especially in more OSR adjacent systems, it's always been of I love this game for its core mechanic, and then anything that branches out, I will create per what is needed at the table. So for me, it's been, I don't even know if it's necessarily even an OSE thing of if technically not every stat is a roll under. It's technically, I think they have different charts of everything from, if your strength is 16, well, your chances of kicking down the door is actually a 4 and 6, not a, whereas its strength of 12 would be a 2 and 6. And so like that, I purposely ignore the, hey, your core, here's what the core system says that you can do. And then, but if it's strength, it then pivots into let's roll 6-siders. If it's agility, if it's dexterity, we're actually going to use D100 system because you're a thief and you have these thief abilities. So like that, I was really into that novelty for a while of like, I'm going to use these dice for this mechanic, and then and they're now we're crafting. So here's a whole new system I'm going to tack onto this. So or that was suggested in a supplement or even in the OSR space. But I tend to more so just now stick to what is the core system, and then what is the least amount of pivoting I can do with whatever it is the players are trying to attempt, whether there are rules that supplement that or not, that where I can still maintain that core system.
I have a tough time with phase transitions. So like whenever they can take lots of different forms, but when we roll initiative and then we have to stop and we have to go do all the, that one I don't like. Same with when we have to break and I now have to go draw a map. That one is tough as well. Like any sort of, like I'm always trying to keep the stream of consciousness one thought, because as soon as you break, you like snip and you have to pull them back in. So drawing maps or like zooming out to the hex crawl map or all of those things, I have a tough time with them. I don't really know if there's a fix though. Like for many of like this, there's stuff you can do like with initiative. You can go around the table or whatever, and I try to sort of cheat when I can. It was like, it's a short fight. What are you gonna do? And just skip initiative altogether and like pick a have the players pick a starting player, go clockwise or counterclockwise from there. But if I can, I'm trying to not phase transition out unless we're on like taking a break or going to the bathroom or something.
I feel like there's this arc that I've seen out multiple like GMs have had of like, for when it comes to initiative, especially of like, initiative's too boring, I want to do something interesting. So then they go in and do like we're going to do all this crazy thing. Like if you have a longsword, you roll this die for initiative. If you have if you use spells, you roll this die, and then it just goes back. Then you loop right back to, guys, we're just going to go around the table. Guys, we're wiping initiative entirely. The players go first every time. That's like in Vagabond's case of like, I actually like that of just, hey, outside of like a unique situation where the players are surprised, the players always go first, because it's one of those things where you think in the moment, like that is what makes or breaks, their experience in the combat. But in reality, it's one of those things that just, all it is just a speed bump we got to go through as we then pivot from exploration brain to combat brain.
We had this in Vagabond. We were looting a dungeon, and they had enough inventory slots for everything, but no one player had enough inventory slots for everything. And there was now a where we were no longer like the base they were in were flooding, and it was all about to go catastrophic. And then they all go, hang on. You take this item, and you take this item from me. And actually, those 2 gems should go to me because they stack up to a 10 inventory slot. And suddenly we were no longer in the tense moment of the dungeon is flooding. We were in inventory management. And because it was all pen and paper, it was bookkeeping. Whereas in like when I played Mouse Ritter, then they have these little icons.
Yeah.
And you could quickly go here, tick, 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 and then we go, right? And now we didn't have to break. So it's not really like any individual system, but it's these sort of on-ramps and off-ramps that a lot of the time I just find are so valuable. Just whatever it is, if there's a way to sort of bring us up to it and then down to it, and whether that's, sometimes it's just DM like trickery, you describe things in the right way. But yeah, just, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely that procedural stuff that I find I have a really hard time, like, remembering, like, oh, right, okay, everybody roll your usage dice for your torches because you've been using them for most of the game and I forgot to tell you that. Or, oh, right, I should check for a random encounter. Or, oh, man, it's really time to rest, right? And there are games that have all kinds of different systems for that, right? You could use like a flux system, right, where people are exploring different caves and it's like every 3 rooms you explore, right, this is what happens. And then I work myself into a, like, that's a hallway. Does it count as a room? Like, what counts as a room, right? That sort of thing. I work myself into these, and it's like, I didn't think it counted as a room, but then you spent all of this time dicking around in the hallway, and so now I feel like maybe it should count as a room, and I should have rolled for that. So should I roll for 2 now, right? Like, those are the kinds of things that I often find myself like, okay, how do I let go of this? And how do I make myself say, I want to make sure that this is happening at a regular interval, but it's also got enough randomness that it's going to be surprising when it happens. So it's not like it's time for this, and now it absolutely happens, right? It's like is there a wandering monster? I don't know. Let's roll to find out. How do I remember to make that roll? Is something that I am forever after, and it's something I'm trying to solve right now with Crows to see if I can make that happen.
Yeah, I actually want to change my answer, Ben. My answer is I purposely
Fine, you're allowed.
I purposely ignore old school essentials. The players have to rest every 6th dungeon turn or something, or whatever that is. Like stuff like that. Again, it's a pattern interruption where, again, part of it is it's bringing back the original, whatever AD&D, first, second edition did. But there's a lot of things that, like, that's why I really don't brag, at least on my channel, that I'm OSR pilled, because there's a lot of things I love about OSR mechanics and systems, but there's a lot of new things too that I feel like are blend together very well, where there are a lot of new problems that the OSR fixed way beforehand, and then then the newer systems dropped it, and now they have these issues, but then there are still clunky things that some people hold on to because, again, it's nostalgia. For me, that's the thing. I'm not coming at this from a nostalgia angle. I'm coming at this as, like, what are these interesting tools over here that supplement the type of games I want to run and the experiences I want to have with players. And that's where I do lean more into the OSR systems, because there are the majority of my toolbox is stuff from those types of games. But there's a lot of clunkiness, like stuff like that, resting every X amount of dungeon turns, or the players take, why of something. To me, that just felt like it's a pattern interruption. So that's my biggest complaint.
I mean, tracking time in RPGs is like one of those perennial problems where it's like, you do old school stuff where it's like, it's all broken into 10-minute turns, but then that makes sense to a certain degree. But then, okay, it takes 10 minutes to search a room. Fine, that's logical. It takes 10 minutes to walk down, a 60-foot hallway. That doesn't make any sense. But so if you make travel also 10 minutes, then you can explore the whole dungeon while someone is just searching one room. And like Shadow Dark has a good solution where it's all real time and you just put on a clock. And so that works to a certain extent. But then there's also weird stuff there where it's like, you can do really long stuff in game that's very short in the real world, and then the clock doesn't work there. So it's all just trade-offs. You have to pick something that works more or less for your group.
And that's why I'm that's why I love the OSR, of the sense of I love being able to Frankenstein my system. Whereas where Pathfinder felt like it was a process of elimination when I was trying to homebrew stuff, and patching things up because I was trying to ignore certain, these edge cases over here, this whole chapter of rules over there. Whereas OSR often has like a pick your favorite core system, and then, I love I love the Shadow Dark timer. I'm just going to, I can take that, and it barely affects it barely touches the original core system of whatever I'm using. But again, I'm somebody I'm more than happy to Frankenstein a game to fit my needs, rather than needing, like, I need this one book to tell me everything that it can do.
Speaking of what Dadi was saying about phase transitions, probably the rule system that I change the most is initiative. I mostly just dramatically simplify initiative in whatever system that I'm running. I can't be bothered with the whole thing where combat's about to start and then there's like the Final Fantasy where you kind of zoom into the actual fight scene and then you play the whole little initiative mini game before you play the actual game. And it's too much of a transition. It takes too long. I just usually go around the table or do side initiative just because I want to, oh, there's a guy attacking you. We're fighting right now. And we just need to move straight into that. And more games I feel like are doing that than used to, but that's something I almost always change.
I like a lot of those, like when I'm doing a big boss battle, I love initiative because it's important when the boss monster goes. Like, and it's important, oh, can we get this one minion before his turn because that minion is going to kill Barton's character and we're going to have to, like that stuff works for me. Sometimes what I really want is like a toolbox of DM tools where it's like, okay, I'm going to just use progress clocks right now, or I'm going to go roll the usage dice. I've done, like, I like these little things where I can just play with them. At one point I was playing an adventure and like, Tiamat was in the background destroying stuff, and we were running a side adventure to that where they were sort of what are the two, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, like Lion King 1.5 side adventure. I lost you, and I called for concentration checks whenever they faced in Tiamat's direction, just because I was like, I want to do something weird with it. If that make like. Just these sort of tools. They go, oh, you want to go look for here? Yeah, I'm going to mark off the progress clock, or I'm going to go, and becoming sort of laissez-faire about that's not the phrase. Just being chill,
I understand what you mean. Like that's something that I've wanted for a long time too. Like I'm trying to work on a new system, Maze Knights, right now, and one of the things I'm doing with the system is I'm trying not to create just like one unified system. I have like 3 or 4 simple little resolution systems. Each resolution system is a little bit different, but they're all tailored for certain types of situations. So like you find yourself in this situation, try using this. Or if like there's something that's building up over time, here's a clock that you can use. And that way you can just pick which resolution system works best for the case that you're in. And I feel like a lot of RPGs could use stuff like that.
That was one of the big promises of the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide in 2014 was that when it was coming, they were like, you're going to be able to modify your game in all these different ways, and and it ultimately fell short of that. And I think even the designers at the time would admit that. And I think that that's a great thing, right? Because essentially what we're talking about is what RB is already doing with his game, right? Which is like, can you go and find lots of things? And I do think that's a big strength of simpler systems, right, that you find in the OSR is like, hey, if you want to take that one piece of Shadow Dark, that hour-long real-time, and bring it in, it's really easy to swap that in with everything else that you're doing.
Literally a paragraph. You can just grab it. It's not that complicated.
So our next question is from Dwiz, who writes the A Night at the Opera blog, which is a really great blog.
Big fan.
Yeah. So he left a question. He says, do you have any opinions on games that you have fully changed your mind on? Whether it's something about running or playing games, or an opinion of a specific system, or something about making games. So what's something big that's changed in your view on RPGs over time? If there is something big for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a guy who played a lot of, started out in the early to mid 90s, right? And then when I was in high school, 3rd edition came out, right? And I was like, oh, this is amazing. There's a rule for everything, right? I went from, and I think we've seen the culture change this way too. So it's not really like a big revelation that I've had. I think I've just changed with the culture of RPGs, which is going from like, you don't need a rule for everything if you have sort of a nice, broad, flexible rule set, right? It was a big thing that for me changed kind of when I was an adult, right? I went from this like, well, how would you be able to do that? There's not a rule for that, right? Like freaking out about it. In college, I remember having arguments with people about that, right? Like, no, the reason 3rd edition and 3.5 is great is because you can do anything because look, there's a rule for everything, right? And then going from that to like, oh wait, it's a lot easier if I, the central processing unit of the game master, right, am able to just look at, because what am I going to do? Just spend my entire time looking up rules? Like that's not as fun, right? And so I think that's an evolution a lot of people have, right? But that's the big one that comes to mind for me.
For me, I've already answered that earlier. But yeah, again, that was Pathfinder 1st edition for me. Again, I was, freshman in college. I had all the time in the world to build my characters from levels 1 through 20. And I was giving monsters character class stat blocks on top of them to make them more. I ran Curse of Strahd through Pathfinder. I gave him I dipped him into monk so he could do this cool, flipping thing, and then he could grab a player and grapple him. And it's like, I had that time. I had that energy to be able to just to literally dig into that system and all of its splat books. But again, that's where then life happens. And so you want something that I want to squeeze this medium. I want to get the most juice out of the squeeze of this medium. And for me, that is the game master being able to have that type of power, or at least that level of adjudication. So that's why, again, I completely made a 180. And so I appreciate think games like Pathfinder for introducing me into the hobby, but it's now to me, whenever I try to bring new people into the hobby, all they see is a 400 plus page rule book. Looking into things like board game design, it's interesting seeing how when you read board game designers of oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this? This 4X board game, there's 20 pages of rules. And I'm like, brother, in the TTRPG space, we have 400. We call that a feature, not a bug. So it is maybe you could argue tomato, but there's a level of, for me, my biggest passion now is bringing in people to the hobby, new people. I don't care. I can easily convince the nerdy kid over here to probably try out a game system. I'm more interested in his Instagram white girl wife who has heard about this through, Stranger Things or whatnot, but wants to see what is the hype all about. Because to me, it's a huge passion of mine, but I want to bring in people in the easiest way possible. So, again, I try to look at the game at our game systems like a brand new person that is not, their only idea of games is Monopoly. So they see that thick rule book, and they're not like, oh wow, I'm getting a bang for my buck for $60 for this 500 pages. It's like, no, to them that's homework. That's scary to them. So I'm a big proponent on whatever the best tools to ease people to bring more people into the hobby.
I like more and more. I'm in the same way that I'm moving away from general rules or whatever. More and more I'm falling in love with boutique game / narrative events or whatever. You ever been to a murder mystery party or stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
I love that kind of stuff. And the fact that it's ephemeral, and that I've run a couple of mega games with 30 people, and we didn't send them rules until the day before. So they just sort of show up as characters. We sent them a whole bunch of background and stuff for them to make their people out of. And then they show up and we're like, by the way, there are a handful, half a page of D6 mechanics or whatever to resolve here. And then the game is just the event, and then we forget it, or we don't write it down. It just exists as this little, sort of Blackmore or that kind of this war game event thing, and it just exists in its own little bubble. Brownstein, yeah, exactly. And we're not going to go back to it. This was it, and because it's so ephemeral. RPGs are already, as a medium, are so ephemeral, and leaning more into that makes me love them more.
I agree. I mean, I haven't been to a lot of LARP-like things. The main one that I've been to was Brownstein when I was at GaryCon a couple of years ago, and awesome. it was run by David Wesley, the guy who created the very first role-playing game ever, and he's still running them. So he does them at conventions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that. Yep. Yeah, that was amazing.
It's incredible. It's this guy is still around and he's still running them, and it is effectively a LARP, right? Because you're in character, you're walking around the room, you're trying to make deals, you're trying to figure out what's going on, and it was just a really incredible experience. And I mean, I made a little video at the end of him summarizing some stuff, but what actually happened in the session is just known to the people who are there, and then it's gone.
I'm very much more in piggybacking off of Dadi's comments of I love finding the right tool for the experience I am looking for. So because again, I came from that space of, let's just take 5th edition, or in my case, let's just take Pathfinder 1st edition and cram it into this horror, system, horror genre I want to do, or, you know. So I appreciate, like, yeah, again, I've had like my own experience with Brownstein, with Kelsey Dion ran that in Green Dragon Fest last year. And it was amazing just to like seeing a part of something like that, with a completely different ways of resolutions, both in person and then when we had to resort to the mechanics themselves, for those more ephemeral things. But yeah, again, I'm big proponent I'm just collecting more RPG books, more so of like, if I really want to have this particular genre or theme or feel, I can actually have something I can grab and lean towards that. Again, I want that toolbox of mechanics to where I want this session to feel like X. So I'm going to go grab Y book so I can make this, at least for this 1 hour block here of this game, feel like that in that moment.
I think it's incredible, by the way, that you were saying, RB, that like you gave Strahd levels of monk in order to do like a super cool move. And I remember doing that with stuff, being like, okay, if I want this Minotaur to be able to grab your weapon with a whip and like, you know, disarm you and grab it, I need to take these feats and I need to, whereas like you could have just written that as a move that Strahd could do, right? And now we know that kind of stuff. And I think that's an amazing evolution.
Yeah.
Same with to go back to the OSR, I was running Vagabond and I'd run one session. It was a long session, I did a whole dungeon. And then the next session, I was like, well, I'm going to make an encounter and make some stat blocks. And it was dead easy. It took me no time at all. And then we had a great time. Just because you just invent some stuff. Like, it isn't that complicated. You just write down, and then he does this.
Or what's the phrase people use to just use bears? Where it's like, if you're confused about what your stat block should be, just use a bear stat block. Just for everything. For like most things, just use a bear stat block. No one will know. No one will care. And it's fine.
That's awesome.
You need to do a lot less work than you think. All right, let's do one more question. This one's from Miso, who wants to know, if you are given control of Dungeons and Dragons, what would you do with it? You have total control of the future of the hobby.
Right.
Are there any big changes or a different direction that you would go in that you think would be good? Because, I mean, I don't know if 6th edition's coming anytime soon, but it might at some point.
I think I would create... you know, and this is not having access to the insider information, right, and all that kind of thing. I would look at creating a more basic 10-level version of the game and an advanced version of the game, because I think there are lots of people who, you know, they want to get into role-playing. They don't even know there are other games out there. They start with Dungeons & Dragons, and so giving them, like, hey, here's a way to start, right? And it's actually simpler, it's easier to get into, right? And this is the way that it works, and it's more stripped down. And then, by the way, if you like this and you want more of a challenge, or hey, if you play these video games, or hey, you know, you've made it to 10th level now and you want a more expansive game, here are the places to go and do it. I think that would actually help onboard more people into the hobby, which I think, if I were in charge of Dungeons and Dragons, that would be my mission, is like, how do I get more people playing this game who aren't already?
Personally, I would make like a big old virtual tabletop project and then cancel it last minute.
No, it'll totally work this time. There's no way that it will all fall apart.
This time it's
like
different.
The last 3 times I tried it. Yeah.
But I get really just to come off of James' comments of like, I'd probably do the same thing of like, I would have these levels of like, you know, again, onboarding. It's all about onboarding. I do not think Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition / 5.5e is a good onboarding game. Outside of like the nerd adjacent person that's already into the, you know, hobby board games and whatnot, like they'll parse that really easily. But again, I'm playing with younger people. I'm playing with my friends' wives who don't have any type of outside of like, oh yeah, we watched Lord of the Rings once.
To this?
Well. But again, I want something to, I would make it so that way I would have a level of the equivalent of quote unquote the children's version of D&D, but really it's just D&D parsed down to its most basic system, and it's written in a way to both better onboard brand new players who are really, again, there's a lot of people just walking into, they heard about the word Dungeons and Dragons, so that's the game they grab off the Barnes and Noble bookshelves. But make it even more simpler. I think like the latest box set, I think has tried with the more modularity, board game-esque pieces of using more cards, using actual like little like slot inserts for your character sheet. But I still think the system as a whole is way too, again, people who look at that, like I show people a 5th edition character sheet and they think it's a tax form.
I think you're absolutely right, both of you. Like the starter set goes a long way to do this, and even then, it's like the grappling rules is go calculate your own DC. Like that's still in the basic set of the rule pamphlet at the back. Go calculate a DC and then have the other guy roll for it. Which I don't know why. I don't know why they're doing that. But yeah, you heard it here first, folks. D&D Basic 2027.
It's been resolved. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I was going to say something really similar. Like because I ran games for kids so much, I feel like if I was in charge of D&D, step number 1 is this game should be able to be DM'd by 10-year-olds. That's like step number 1, because if you want to grow the hobby, you need to have kids enthusiastic about D&D running D&D. And that's not really possible if you want to use 5th edition as written. If you really hacked 5th edition down, okay, fine, maybe. But if you really want to get kids into it, it has to be a radically simpler game. And then maybe you could, like an advanced version where things are scaled up a little bit if you want more rules complexity. But the core of the game should be, we can play D&D in 10 minutes from now if we wanted to. And exactly. I feel like that's the direction that they're going in. I was talking to Mike Merles about this a little bit, and he was saying something similar, that like if they're doing a 6th edition, they're probably going to just simplify things down even further, because like for so long, D&D was this ultra niche thing. And 5th edition has kind of demonstrated that it has this mass appeal. Tons and tons of millions of people are interested in D&D and know what D&D is sort of. But they didn't expect that. It became much bigger than they expected. And the rule system is just not simple enough to grab all of those people and get them into the game. So that's probably the next step.
There's a board game designer. He created Radlands. Daniel, I'm going to screw up his last name.
I love that game.
Daniel Peachnik. He talks about how from a board game design space of like a lot of you wannabe designers or people making games should ultimately really, you should come at it from thinking of how would I make this? What would the children's version of my game look like? And that should probably be your game. And at least when it comes to broader appeal, you can widen your net of your audience. And again, onboard more people into that space. So I definitely think there needs to be I wouldn't call it necessarily a D&D, kid version, but there needs to be, I think we need to go back to like a basic expert kind of like system. You start with that and then, launch that for your 6th edition. And then 2-3 years later, you drop the advanced edition for, again, the fans that are you've already got the fans that currently it's really about, bringing in more people into this hobby.
I think the like Moldvay version of D&D, it's over there somewhere, but I think it says like for ages 10 and up. And that's not really an exaggeration. Like the game is simple enough that a 10-year-old could realistically run it. So,
yeah.
All right, we've decided. So, Watsy, get on that, because that's what you're going to be doing next.
You're welcome.
This has been the board of directors meeting.
Yeah, my consultation invoice will be in the mail shortly.
Oh, smart.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks to all of you for joining me and sharing your wisdom with everyone. And hopefully we'll have you back again some other time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great.